I would expect that folks in the community could start to see parts of Leios, as early as sometime next year. As part of this handover to engineering, we've been working internally on creating a development dashboard site that will be launched sometime fourth quarter.
What's up, Ida Gang? Welcome into Dapp Central, your home for everything blockchain and crypto. My name is Fareed here. I'm super excited and fired up to be talking about Ouroboros Leios today. We're going to be joined by a key contributor here from IOG to break down exactly what this scaling solution brings, not only in terms of speed, but also throughput. So without any further ado, let me bring up today's guest. We've got Chris Bennett coming in representing Dev Relations with the Innovations and R&D Group from IOG. Welcome aboard, my man. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great, Fareed. Thank you so much for having me here, and to the Dapp Central audience. Really excited to chat a little bit about Leios. It's really a game changer, and I just get so excited anytime I get out in front of the community and talk about some of the cool work that we're doing.
Awesome. Nice and sweet. And yeah, let's just dive right on in because I feel like there's just a lot to unpack here. Maybe before we talk about the technicals, though, we learn a little bit about you, right? So do you mind giving us a little bit about your background, your expertise, and why you're the right man for this job?
Yeah, you bet. So like you said, my name is Chris Bennett. I come from a long background, pre-Web3, in IT solutions consulting, primarily on the delivery side. And I kind of had my light bulb moment with Web3 about 10 years ago, when I realized, boy, there's a lot more to this than just Bitcoin. It's like a lot of people, I think, still are today. Do I know what blockchain is? Oh, yeah, I know what blockchain is. It's Bitcoin. And then I realized there was so much more going on, and the Web3 moniker really made sense. This really is the third revolution of internet technology. So once I realized that, I was standing there on the beach with my surfboard ready, and there was this huge wave coming. Jumped right into the Web3 world, started a training company, and then moved into developer relations. And now I'm just over the moon happy to be part of the Cardano team and working on things like Leios.
Awesome. And always interesting to hear about how people have come into this space. And I do have to say, before we go any further, that beard is sweet. I love it. I love it.
I appreciate it. Covering up a whole lot of ugly under here, so it's doing its job.
Well, that makes two of us. Don't feel bad. All right, let's jump into the serious work now. So, for anyone who hasn't heard, Chris, what is Ouroboros Leios? Why is it so important? And maybe just give us like a brief overview, right, of how it actually does what it does.
Absolutely. So Leios, if you're not familiar with it, is the latest enhancement to Ouroboros. And Ouroboros is the consensus protocol that runs on the Cardano blockchain. And what Leios is really focused on is increasing throughput. We've seen there's a pretty hard ceiling in the blockchain world. It's really hard to get 1,000 transactions per second or north of that. And we see that some platforms have achieved that, but in our minds, they're doing so by making unacceptable compromises, often in terms of centralization. If you spend any time in the Web3 world, you've undoubtedly heard about the blockchain trilemma. That's really what we're trying to solve. How do we get greater throughput without increasing costs, and most importantly, increasing centralization? And so that's what Leios is really all about. And underneath the covers, the way that's being achieved is changing the mechanics of the transaction. Traditionally, what we've seen with nodes on traditional blockchains is that their usage spikes. These nodes are very busy performing work when transactions are being recorded, and then when transactions aren't, they're largely just sitting there idle. And Leios really helps to fill some of that idle time to deliver greater throughput to the network. So that's what it's all about, and why we're really excited, because in our mind, once you get into 4 and 5 digit transactions per second, that's when the really interesting, fun applications get to come along. And that's where I think we're really going to see an explosion in Web3 adoption.
Nicely said and nicely put. There are a couple of things that I want to maybe just reiterate for the viewers, right? And I think a little bit of that is that there's something in this for everybody. And so looking at some of the key benefits, right? You talked about how this is going to deliver massive performance gains for the entire ecosystem without compromising the core principles, which I know Cardano's known for, its rigorous approach to just following the process, right? Making sure that everything is peer reviewed and researched. Now, I want to give you the opportunity to maybe break down how this benefits SPOs, how this benefits developers, and just users within the ecosystem in general. So again, I realize that people that are watching this content could be coming in from every or any side of the ecosystem, right? Whether they're an SPO, like I said, a developer, or just a traditional end user.
Absolutely. So, great question. And I'll start by clearing up a misconception that I had when I first got involved with Leios. And I think it's a pretty common one. We talk about Leios and these incredible performance increases, and it's easy to think it's the first place my mind went when I first learned about it. It's easy to think, okay, Leios is going to make my transactions faster. And that's not necessarily what's happening. And I think maybe the best way to understand that is through analogy. Imagine that you've got a great place to eat down the street from you. Maybe they make the best grilled cheese and soup in town. And to get your grilled cheese and soup is about 5 minutes once you place the order. And so that's fine if you go in there and there's nobody else in the restaurant because they've only got one person cooking in the back. You're going to wait 5 minutes. That's not too long. But I think we all experience those restaurants that sometimes can be a victim of their own success. And boy, what do you do when you really want a grilled cheese and soup, but the line is out the door and you know that it's going to be a 5 minute wait for every person ahead of you? That time starts to stack up pretty quick. Now imagine if that same restaurant said, okay, well, we've got to get greater throughput. So what we're going to do is hire multiple cooks now so we can make multiple soup and sandwich orders simultaneously. And that's really what Leios is doing. It's not necessarily making the individual transactions faster, but it's giving Cardano the ability to process many thousands of transactions in parallel. And so the effect that has, especially for users and Dapp developers, is that your users are going to see very consistent performance in your Dapps, regardless of how busy or slow the network is. And that's a real game changer. I think all of us have used Web3 Dapps where the performance can be very unpredictable, and oftentimes that has nothing to do with the developers or the architects of that particular application. You might write a very good app that just happens to launch on the day a popular meme coin launches, and your initial users come back with a poor impression of the performance. So that's the biggest impact, I think, on the user and the developer side. Now, as far as the SPOs are concerned, that's another audience that we've really paid a lot of attention to, really gone out to the community and sought a lot of feedback from that group to make sure that this is as smooth a transition as possible. Some of the benefits for the SPOs are that whatever hardware you're running with right now, it's very likely going to be compatible with Leios. We're not looking at huge upgrades in terms of processing, RAM, anything like that. About the biggest impact for SPOs is going to be egress bandwidth, the bandwidth going out of the node. And that's because there's a lot of voting and ranking and consensus going on in Leios that wasn't happening before. And depending on your hosting provider, that may have cost implications. Luckily, we have some cost estimators on our Leios website. So if you are an SPO, you can punch in your numbers there and get an idea of what that additional cost might be if there is any.
Man, you are a fountain of knowledge and a wonderful speaker, by the way. If you've never thought about running a YouTube channel, I would definitely recommend that you do so. And so maybe we sort of shift gears now because we've talked about things from a very high level view. Let's maybe sort of focus in now on what is actually going on. So do you mind maybe breaking down some of the recent milestones, biggest achievements, and what you guys are currently working on in this moment in terms of development?
Absolutely. So, it's great that we're talking right now because we're in the midst of really one of the biggest milestones so far, and that is the handover from the R&D research and development group at IOG over to the engineering group over to IOE. So For about the past year or so, Leios has really been owned by the Innovation R&D Group. And really our focus there is taking these ideas, putting the research into them, building out the prototypes, finding out if they're viable. And then if it looks like we've got something viable that's going to do what we want it to do, we go ahead and document all of our work and we hand it over to engineering. And that's the process that's actually happening right now, September 2025. This is handoff starting October 1st. This is going to be in the hands of our engineering group who will actually be building out Leios. So all the cool stuff that we've seen in the research papers and the simulators starts to become real. If anyone in the audience really wants to dive in and see all the details, we just published our SIP, the Cardano Improvement Proposal, that details the inner workings of Leios, things like input blocks, endorser blocks, ranking blocks, how they work together, how transactions are recorded. And that's all available up on our website for you. I'll provide you with the links and you can share those with your audience or anyone who wants to dive in and provide any feedback. We also host monthly meetings. The next one will be October 1st, where you can hear regular updates from the development team, ask questions, give us suggestions or criticisms, or just kind of share your thoughts. And so we would welcome anyone and everyone to join us there. You can find that streaming live on our YouTube channel, and you can send questions and comments and everything right in the chat and get live interaction with the team members. It's great.
Awesome. And thank you. And as always, I will leave the links to everything that Chris has just mentioned down below as a part of today's video discussion. Now, Chris, being so close to the ground when it comes to development of Leios, what would you say, in your opinion, right, is something that's got you super excited or something that's got you the most excited about this big release?
You know, boy, I'm really telling here. In my age, I'm old enough to remember this transition from dial-up internet to broadband. And in the early days of the internet, we were all dialing up through a modem. 56K was a pretty neck-breaking speed back then. And there was kind of this collective understanding that the internet has incredible potential. And once we can get decent connection speeds, once broadband becomes common enough, we all knew that potential would be unlocked. We didn't know exactly what was going to come. We just knew that amazing things would. And sure enough, around the turn of the century, broadband became very, very commonplace. And in the years after that, we really see what we know as the modern internet starting to take shape. Sites like YouTube and Amazon and Reddit, all the sites that make up the current internet today. I think with Leios, we're at a very, very similar point with Web3. For the past 10, 12, 15 years, however long you've been in Web3, I think collectively we've known there's tremendous potential here. This thing really is going to transform the world. And we might not be able to predict exactly what shakes out of that transformation, but we know it's coming. And so that's why I'm really excited about Leios, because I think wherever it takes us, we're going to look back in 5 years, 10 years and say, wow, this looks nothing like how I remembered it. And it really is a part of mainstream everyday life now.
No, that's awesome to hear. And that's progress, being able to build something, put it onto the wild. And, I think it's a positive thing, not being able to recognize it because people have done so much to add onto it. Right. And so that said, is something like Leios open source to where the community can potentially contribute as they see things, right? Obviously, you guys are sort of the engineering arm behind the initial product, but once it goes out there, will people have the ability to make modifications, plug and play, or just modify it to best meet their needs? I think a little bit about Hydra and a gentleman named George in the ecosystem who's building something called Hydra Zoa, right? And that was a proposal that came out through Catalyst, which was for not an extension, but a variation of the Hydra tech. Could we potentially see something like that with Ouroboros Leios?
Absolutely. All of the work that we do is public, is open source. Not only is the community able to come in and participate and interact with the team, it's something we strongly encourage. So, if this is something that interests you, I think there's ways that anybody of any background or skill level or interest level can contribute. If this is something that sparks your interest, don't necessarily worry that you're not a developer, don't come from a super technical background. around, jump in, join the monthly calls, jump into our GitHub discussions, share what you think would work good or what you like versus what you don't. Anybody who's been a part of these large development projects is aware that it's very easy sometimes when you're a part of that team to lose the forest for the trees. And so having folks in the community who can come in and provide a unique viewpoint or maybe just remind us of something that we've overlooked that we shouldn't have is really, really worth its weight in gold. So we really view these development projects as a team effort with the community rather than us just throwing something over the wall. Now, obviously, as the handover to engineering is occurring and development is actually taking place, the mechanics of how someone would take that work and contribute in the areas where they might be able to do it is still being defined. But we absolutely welcome and encourage community involvement.
Thank you there. As a follow-up, and I think this is sort of the elephant in the room here, we have to discuss timelines, right?
Mhm.
People always ask when. Could you give us a better idea to the best of your ability? Of course, I realize that, timelines are shifting and that this is code, which obviously takes a lot of time and there's a lot of nuance involved here. But do you have a timeline, or does the team at IO have a timeline that they're targeting to get Leios out into the community's hand on the official mainnet?
Yeah, so we don't have an official timeline yet, nothing that we want to publicly commit to. Just kind of reading the tea leaves, I would expect that folks in the community could start to see parts of Leios, as early as sometime next year. Now, I know that's not a very satisfying answer for the Dapp Central audience, so I can do one better than that. And that is, as part of this handover to engineering, we've been working internally on creating a development dashboard site that will be launched sometime fourth quarter. So coming up here in the next few weeks. You can go to that dashboard site once it's launched. You can check the development status. You can see who's working on what tickets and what PRs are being addressed. So if you really, really want to get into the nitty gritty details of where development activities are happening, what's next up for development, what's going to be released, etc., that's going to be the place to do it. So for folks in the community who really want a more satisfying answer on timeline, I would direct them to that site once it goes up.
Perfect, and thank you. Now, earlier you alluded to the fact that the community could use this for a lot of different applications. Again, this could be personal, maybe just thinking broader here, how do you see this tech actually being used? I know that there's high frequency trading. We've talked about Hydra and how people could potentially be playing and doing things in their own head. But, from a practical standpoint, how do you see people using Leios?
That's such a great question, and I think just like any huge technological milestone, we're very likely going to look back and we're going to say, wow, all the ways that we thought people would use it, they turned out using it for something different or using it in a way we never could have foreseen. But you mentioned a lot of the classic DeFi cases, high volume trading, stable coins, etc. I think there are just some really interesting things, outside of those traditional use cases that Leios could enable. Back in March, we had a team offsite over in Edinburgh where we got to meet with everyone face to face. One of the interesting ideas we talked about is, hey, at the upper ends of our theoretical, transactions per second range, we're kind of in the range of simulating every retail credit card payment in the United States. Actually using cryptocurrency as money has been a pretty big barrier, even though that's, in theory, its most basic job. And a lot of that really has to do with this throughput situation. If everybody's spending a little bit of Bitcoin at the grocery store checkout line, it doesn't take long before the volume simply brings the network to its knees. So I think it's going to put Web3 and crypto into places in the traditional world where we haven't seen it yet, where we've maybe known where it's going. But I think, again, the most exciting thing to me about all of this is the unknown. I think there are a lot of use cases we've never thought about on Web3 simply because of that limitation. Just like when broadband internet access rolled out, we couldn't really predict, that we would be in this exact spot today. We just knew we would be somewhere different. And so I'm really excited to see, boy, what are those use cases we haven't even thought of yet? Another one that we've talked about in Web3 pretty consistently over the years is voting, is using this technology in civic areas. We've seen a lot of small trials of that, but you never really that happening on mass scale. And again, that's largely due to that throughput issue. Well, now a lot of these use cases that we've been talking about, since the early days of Web3, are now starting to look technically feasible. And so I'm really excited to see how all that shakes out.
Yeah, same here. Very, very exciting times ahead here. Now, I've got two more questions before we dive into closing thoughts here, Chris. And you've been doing an amazing job, by the way. Just got to let you know. And so,
I appreciate it.
anytime, as we get ready to wind things down, we have to just briefly touch on hurdles, right? So, this is obviously a very big project, a lot of moving parts. What would you say has been the biggest challenge, right, when it comes to getting this thing delivered?
That's a great question. I think for us, the biggest challenges have really been the unknowns, and that's really for me personally why working in this innovation R&D group is so exciting, because we're not starting out with all the answers. We're starting out with something that we think might be a good idea that might have some potential, but we don't know. So there were a number of design decisions that were changed or modified along the way because as we built them out and ran the simulations, we found out, well, that just didn't work the way that we thought it would, or that introduced problems downstream. A lot of the ideas that we thought would work very well, once we started to dive into, we realized had some security implications that aren't immediately obvious. So really kind of dealing with those unknowns. And the challenge there is, like in any environment, you've always got folks who want to know, when can this be released? What does that timeline look like? When can we get hands-on with it? And that of course, makes answering those kinds of questions a little bit difficult. Another challenge, but also I think a great strength, is the Leios team has adopted this follow the sun development model. And you'll see this when the dashboard launches. There's literally someone working on Leios somewhere around the world at any point during the day. And so that introduces a lot of modern project management challenges as well. How do we all stay in sync? What time in the world works nice enough for everyone to meet? And when we decide to meet up in person, where's the best place to do that? But those are all fun challenges to address. And I think just come naturally when you're working on anything of this size and scale and magnitude.
Thank you. And as we get ready to wind things out, send us home with your final thoughts and key takeaways.
Yeah, final thoughts. I would say, Dapp Central audience, if you're watching this today, September 2025, make a little bookmark, make a little note in your head, and come back to this in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years. I really do think that we're going to look back and we're going to see that the Web3 landscape is dramatically different, not just the Cardano ecosystem, because I think, when Leios goes out and achieves everything that we know it's going to achieve, that's going to have a huge ripple effect, sorry for the bad pun, on the rest of the Web3 industry. And I think we're going to see a lot of other platforms adopting similar approaches, trying to match the performance that Leios offers. So I'm really excited for the downstream changes, not just tackling some of those use cases like we talked about earlier that we've been wanting to tackle for years, but also seeing the new ones that flush out. I don't know as a community that we've ever really sat down and collectively thought of, boy, if we have 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 transactions a second even, what can we do? And I think that puts the technology in so many new and exciting places where it just hasn't been yet. So that's what I'm most excited about, and I hope your audience is as well.
Yes, not just my audience, me included. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that will bring us here to the end. None other than Chris Bennett, leading the helm here when it comes to developer relationships with the innovation and R&D group at IOG, giving us a brief update here with everything going on with Ouroboros Leios, a highly anticipated scaling and throughput solution here being brought to the Cardano ecosystem. It has been a pleasure here, Chris. And for the viewers watching at home, if you guys have enjoyed today's chat talking about everything that's been going on here in the ecosystem, I would appreciate you if you could smash that thumbs up on the way out. It is by far one of the easiest and simplest ways to show your support here on the channel. If you want more of this kind of content, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you have any questions for me or Chris, feel free to voice off down below. And as I mentioned, links to everything that he's referenced down in the video description. Make sure to check that out. Again, Chris, thank you for your time. We'll see you all in the next one. Cheers, everybody. Take care.